The last photograph I ever captured became the only truth no one was ready to see. I am an old Canon AE-1 film camera, built from cool metal, polished glass, tiny springs, and quiet patience. I have never breathed, never spoken aloud, never loved the way humans do. Yet somehow, I became the keeper of a love story that outlived every promise whispered beneath golden sunsets. Long before anyone remembered my name, I sat forgotten inside a dusty display case in a small vintage camera shop tucked between a record store and an old bookstore on a quiet street outside Boston. Day after day, strangers picked me up, admired my weight, smiled politely, and placed me back on the shelf as if memories were too expensive to carry home. Then one crisp October afternoon, the bell above the door chimed, and someone walked in whose hands trembled ever so slightly before touching me. His name was Ethan Brooks, 22 years old, with windswept chestnut hair that refused to stay neat, clear blue eyes hidden behind thin silver-framed glasses, and the kind of smile that appeared only after he forgot someone was looking. He wasn't searching for the newest camera. He wasn't interested in perfect technology. He wanted imperfections because, in his words, perfect pictures rarely felt honest. The old shop owner laughed softly and placed me into Ethan's hands. The moment his fingers wrapped around my worn leather grip, I understood something impossible. Some people don't buy cameras. They rescue forgotten witnesses. Ethan carefully loaded a fresh roll of 36 exposure film into my body, adjusted my focus ring with surprising tenderness, and whispered, "Let's see if you still remember how to tell stories." If only he had known. Cameras never forget. Outside, autumn painted every sidewalk in shades of amber and crimson. The air carried the scent of roasted coffee and fallen maple leaves while college students hurried across campus with backpacks slung over one shoulder. Ethan wandered slowly, stopping every few steps to capture ordinary things that everyone else ignored. Sunlight reflecting in a puddle, an elderly couple sharing one umbrella, a little girl laughing as pigeons scattered into the sky. He believed beauty lived in moments people almost missed. I believed he was searching for someone without realizing it. Then, exactly 12 frames into that first roll of film, everything changed. A voice burst through the afternoon like unexpected music. "Hey, wait. I think that's my notebook." Ethan turned instinctively, lifting me with practiced hands before he even knew what he was seeing. Through my lens appeared a young man unlike anyone I had ever framed before. Noah Carter, 21 years old. Tousled dark blonde hair catching the sunlight like strands of gold, warm hazel eyes bright with effortless confidence, broad shoulders wrapped in a simple denim jacket, and an easy grin capable of making complete strangers smile back without thinking. He looked impossibly alive, as though the entire season had quietly decided to become a person. Ethan froze for the briefest heartbeat. So did I. My shutter clicked before either of us realized his finger had pressed the button. The photograph lasted one tiny fraction of a second. The consequences would last a lifetime. Neither of them knew that a single accidental frame had just begun counting down toward the last photograph I would ever take. People like to believe love begins with a confession, but they rarely notice the thousand silent moments that arrive long before the words. Ethan certainly did not. He lowered me after capturing that unexpected photograph, blinking as Noah jogged across the campus lawn with an embarrassed laugh before finally catching the notebook that had slipped from his backpack. Instead of walking away, Ethan did something unusual for him. He smiled first. Noah answered with an even brighter grin that seemed to dissolve the cool autumn air. "Nice timing," Noah joked, pointing toward me. "I hope you did not catch my most graceful moment." Ethan chuckled quietly. "Actually, I think it looked pretty authentic." That single sentence became the beginning of conversations neither of them had planned to have. Over the following weeks, they crossed paths again and again as though the campus itself enjoyed rearranging sidewalks just to place them together. Sometimes it happened outside the student center where Noah grabbed iced coffee before his morning classes. Sometimes inside the library where Ethan searched for photography books while Noah pretended he was studying far more than he actually was. Every encounter ended with another photograph. I watched Noah slowly lose the habit of asking whether Ethan wanted a picture. Instead, he simply smiled whenever he noticed me pointing in his direction. Humans call it comfort. Cameras recognize it as trust. By the middle of November, 14 exposures remained on the roll of film. Ethan photographed Noah laughing beside a food truck, balancing a paper cup of hot cider while colorful leaves drifted around him like tiny pieces of sunlight. 3 frames later, Noah insisted Ethan step in front of me for once. "You are always hiding behind the camera," he said. "Someone has to prove you exist." Ethan hesitated, awkward as ever, before setting my timer and hurrying beside Noah on a weathered wooden bench overlooking the Charles River. The shutter clicked. For the first time, both young men occupied the same frame. Neither realized how differently they looked when standing together. Ethan's reserved smile became genuine. Noah's confident expression softened into something quieter, almost protective. Even the afternoon light seemed to linger around them longer than necessary. As Thanksgiving approached, colder winds swept across Boston, and the sky turned silver earlier each evening. They continued exploring the city with me hanging comfortably from Ethan's shoulder, wandering through holiday markets, independent bookstores, neighborhood bakeries, and streets lined with glowing storefront windows. They argued playfully about which coffee shops served the best cinnamon latte, laughed over terrible parking jobs, and challenged each other to photograph ordinary places from impossible angles. Every click of my shutter quietly erased another unused frame. 36 chances had once felt endless. Now the remaining numbers seemed to disappear faster than either of them noticed. Yet there was something else I noticed before they did. Whenever Noah believed Ethan was distracted, his eyes rested on him just a little longer than friendship required. Whenever Ethan developed a new roll of film in the campus darkroom, he always paused at Noah's photographs first, studying them with the careful attention usually reserved for priceless works of art. Neither spoke about these tiny changes. They did not need to. Light reveals truths long before language does. And hidden inside the roll still waiting to be developed was one image neither of them remembered taking. An image that would soon make me question whether photographs capture memories or quietly predict the future. The strangest thing about memories is that people always assume they remember them correctly. They do not. Film remembers differently. It preserves the glance someone thought no one noticed, the smile that lasted half a heartbeat longer than intended, the silence that quietly changed everything. Winter settled over Boston with frosted sidewalks, glowing streetlights, and the comforting scent of roasted chestnuts drifting through downtown. Ethan and Noah had become inseparable without ever discussing when friendship had quietly become routine. Every Saturday morning they explored somewhere new, searching for hidden murals, antique bookstores, tiny diners, or neighborhoods where old brick buildings reflected the soft afternoon sun. I hung from Ethan's shoulder as naturally as his scarf, swaying gently with every step while my metal body absorbed the rhythm of their laughter. Noah had developed a habit of stealing me without asking. "You always make me look better than I deserve," he joked one afternoon, carefully raising me toward Ethan, who was pretending to admire a bookstore window. Ethan rolled his eyes, but the corners of his mouth betrayed him with an unmistakable smile. Noah pressed the shutter. Click. Ethan looked away at the exact wrong moment. Click. Ethan laughed after realizing what had happened. Click. He laughed even harder. I did not simply capture photographs anymore. I collected versions of Ethan that only Noah seemed capable of bringing into existence. A few days later, Ethan developed another role inside the campus darkroom. Red safety lights bathed the room in a quiet crimson glow while trays of developers slowly transformed blank paper into visible memories. He always worked with extraordinary patience, but this time something unexpected happened. One photograph appeared beneath the chemicals, and Ethan stopped moving altogether. It was not the image itself that surprised him. It was what Noah was looking at. The photograph showed Noah sitting beside the river during sunset, smiling softly toward someone standing behind the camera. Toward Ethan. There were dozens of beautiful landscapes on that roll, colorful skylines, snowy streets, old churches, and sparkling reflections on the water. Yet Ethan kept returning to that single portrait. His fingers hovered above the drying print as though touching it might disturb whatever truth had quietly surfaced. "That one is different," he whispered without realizing he had spoken aloud. Cameras cannot hear thoughts, but I have always recognized hesitation. It sounds almost identical to hope. December brought final exams, crowded libraries, and endless cups of coffee that somehow tasted stronger after midnight. Noah often appeared carrying 2 drinks without asking what Ethan wanted because he already knew. Ethan began saving Noah a seat before every study session, even when he arrived first. Their conversations wandered far beyond classes. They debated favorite childhood movies, impossible road trips, forgotten dreams, and places they hoped to visit someday. Sometimes neither of them spoke at all. They simply watched snowflakes drift beyond the library windows while comfortable silence filled every empty space between them. Humans often believe silence means nothing happened. They could not be more mistaken. Some of the most important changes make no sound at all. By the time Christmas lights decorated every corner of campus, only one untouched roll of film remained inside Ethan's backpack. He smiled while loading it into me, completely unaware that this ordinary decision would preserve the single image capable of changing not only how they remembered their story, but whether it would ever truly end. There are moments that never appear extraordinary while they are happening, yet years later, they become the exact memories people would give anything to relive. January arrived wrapped in fresh snow, bright blue skies, and air so cold it turned every breath into a tiny cloud. Ethan and Noah returned to campus after winter break, carrying new schedules, fresh notebooks, and quiet excitement that neither one admitted was really about seeing the other again. The first morning they met outside the photography building, Noah spread his arms dramatically and laughed. "I was beginning to think you had replaced me with mountain landscapes." Ethan smiled as he lifted me from his shoulder. "Landscapes do not complain when I ask them to stand still." "Neither do I," Noah answered, striking an exaggerated pose that lasted only a second before both of them burst into laughter. My shutter captured the moment without hesitation. I had begun noticing something the two of them still refused to name. Ethan no longer photographed the world in search of beautiful places. He searched for wherever Noah happened to be standing. Coffee shops became beautiful because Noah sat beside the window. Snow-covered sidewalks became worth remembering because Noah left footprints beside Ethan's. Even crowded subway platforms somehow looked warmer whenever Noah appeared in the frame. Through every new roll of film, one quiet pattern continued repeating itself. Nearly every photograph contained Noah. If he was absent, Ethan rarely bothered pressing the shutter at all. One rainy afternoon, they escaped into a small art museum where visitors spoke in gentle whispers beneath towering skylights. Noah wandered from painting to painting while Ethan lingered several steps behind, pretending to admire the artwork. The truth rested inside my lens. Ethan was not studying the paintings. He was studying the expressions on Noah's face as colors reflected across his eyes. He waited patiently until Noah smiled at an impressionist landscape glowing with golden light. Click! Then Noah turned unexpectedly and caught Ethan watching him instead of the canvas. For one perfectly suspended heartbeat, neither of them looked away. My shutter remained silent because Ethan forgot to press it. Not every unforgettable moment becomes a photograph. Some exist only because someone was too overwhelmed to interrupt them. Days later, inside the darkroom, Ethan spread dozens of freshly developed prints across a long wooden table. Landscapes, bridges, bookstores, cafes, snowy parks, city lights, reflections in puddles. At first glance, they seemed wonderfully varied. Yet from where I rested nearby, another truth became impossible to ignore. Noah appeared in almost every collection. Sometimes he stood front and center with his effortless smile. Sometimes he was only a blurred reflection in a store window or a silhouette beneath glowing streetlights. Even when Ethan believed he was photographing architecture or sunsets, Noah somehow remained hidden somewhere inside the composition. Ethan slowly realized it too. He gathered the photographs into separate stacks before quietly laughing to himself. "I thought I was documenting the city," he whispered. "Apparently, I have only been documenting one person." He did not sound embarrassed. He sounded surprised by his own heart. Cameras cannot feel love, but we recognize the gravity it creates. Every frame had begun orbiting the same person. Every memory pointed toward the same smile. Every ordinary afternoon quietly transformed into something irreplaceable. Neither Ethan nor Noah understood that life was already arranging every joyful moment into a collection that would someday become infinitely more precious than either of them could possibly imagine. The hardest photographs to capture are never the ones people refuse to pose for. They are the ones that reveal feelings no one is brave enough to name. February arrived quietly, bringing longer afternoons and the first subtle promise that winter would not last forever. Ethan carried me almost every day now, my worn leather strap resting comfortably across his shoulder as naturally as if I had always belonged there. Noah no longer asked permission before borrowing me. Instead, he would simply flash that familiar grin, lift me to his eye, and announce, "Your turn." Ethan would groan in playful protest every single time, yet he never truly objected. He always stepped into the frame. It became their unspoken tradition. One Saturday morning, they boarded a commuter train headed toward a small coastal town north of Boston, chasing the kind of quiet streets photographers loved and tourists usually overlooked. The ocean breeze carried the scent of salt and weathered wood, while fishing boats rocked gently against old docks beneath a pale blue sky. Noah wandered ahead, stopping every few yards to admire colorful storefronts or wave at friendly shop owners. Ethan followed with patient steps, raising me whenever Noah forgot the world was watching. Those were always the best photographs. Genuine joy has a way of finding perfect light without trying. Near the harbor, they discovered an antique carousel that had not opened for the season yet. Noah laughed as he leaned against the painted horses behind the safety fence. "You know," he said, "one day these pictures are going to make us feel really old." Ethan lowered me for a moment before answering. "Then we should probably keep taking more of them." Noah looked at him with unusual softness, the kind of expression that appeared only when jokes quietly surrendered to honesty. "Promise?" he asked. Ethan nodded without hesitation. "I promise." I captured the exact second those words settled between them. Neither of them realized promises often become far more important after they are spoken than while they are being made. Later that afternoon, they climbed a hill overlooking the lighthouse where sunlight spilled across the Atlantic Ocean in shimmering ribbons of gold. Noah reached for me again. "One more picture," he said, but this time, no timer. He approached a passing couple and politely asked if they would mind pressing the shutter. Ethan looked slightly embarrassed as he stood beside Noah, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. Then, almost instinctively, Noah closed the small distance between them until their shoulders touched. It was not dramatic. It was not planned. It simply felt natural. The shutter clicked. The couple smiled and handed me back. "You two make a great team," the woman said warmly before walking away. Ethan and Noah exchanged a quick glance, neither correcting her nor commenting on the remark. Instead, they laughed together, though the laughter carried a new kind of nervous warmth. During the train ride home, Ethan developed the habit of looking out the window while Noah quietly scrolled through music on his phone, occasionally sharing one earbud so they could listen together. They did not speak much. They did not need to. Silence had become another language they both understood. As twilight painted the sky in shades of lavender and deep orange, I rested across Ethan's lap, holding another collection of ordinary moments that were slowly becoming extraordinary. Inside me, only a handful of unused frames remained. Each press of the shutter felt heavier than the last, not because my mechanics were wearing down, but because I had begun to understand something neither of them could yet see. Every beautiful memory they were creating was quietly leading them toward a photograph that neither of them expected, yet one that would eventually become the single image capable of preserving everything words could never fully explain. Every story reaches a moment when time slows down, not because the world stops moving, but because the heart quietly realizes nothing will ever feel quite the same again. March arrived with warmer afternoons, blooming cherry trees across the Boston Common, and sunlight that lingered just a little longer each evening. Ethan had almost finished the final roll of film inside me. Only 4 exposures remained, though neither he nor Noah seemed to think about numbers anymore. They had become too busy collecting moments. One Friday after classes, Noah surprised Ethan with tickets to a rooftop photography exhibit overlooking the city skyline. "I figured you spend enough time photographing everyone else," Noah said with a grin. "Tonight, somebody should inspire you instead." Ethan laughed softly, adjusting my focus ring as they stepped onto the rooftop, where strings of warm lights stretched above wooden walkways and framed photographs fluttered gently in the spring breeze. Visitors wandered quietly from display to display, but Ethan barely noticed the artwork. Every few minutes, he found himself lifting me toward Noah instead. Noah stood beside. Panoramic views of Boston Harbor, leaning against the glass railing while golden sunset painted soft amber highlights across his dark blonde hair. Click. He smiled while reading handwritten captions beneath old black and white photographs. Click. He turned unexpectedly after hearing Ethan call his name, and for the briefest instant his expression became completely unguarded, warm, peaceful, and undeniably affectionate. Click. 3 frames remained. As the evening grew cooler, live acoustic music drifted through the rooftop garden. Couples danced slowly beneath hanging lights while families gathered around small tables, sharing dessert and conversation. Noah rested both hands against the railing, watching airplanes cross the fading sky. "Do you ever wonder why photographs matter so much?" he asked without looking away. Ethan stood beside him, thinking longer than usual before answering. "Because they remind us that even ordinary days become impossible to recreate." Noah nodded thoughtfully. "Then promise me something else." Ethan looked toward him. "Anything." Noah smiled, though this smile carried quiet sincerity instead of playful confidence. "No matter where life takes us after graduation, do not stop bringing your camera. I do not want us to become people who only remember each other through fading memories." Ethan answered almost immediately. "You will never have to worry about that." I wished I could have warned them that promises are often tested far sooner than anyone expects. As they prepared to leave, Noah reached for me one last time. "Come here," he said, guiding Ethan toward a blooming cherry tree overlooking the city lights. A friendly passerby offered to help without being asked. Ethan stood beside Noah once again, their shoulders naturally touching as spring petals drifted around them in the evening breeze. The shutter clicked. 2 exposures remained. Walking back toward campus, they wandered through quiet streets glowing beneath old street lamps, talking about graduation, future jobs, apartments they might someday afford, and dreams that still felt comfortably distant. Neither noticed the loose edge of my aging leather strap gently pulling away. After decades of faithful use, I noticed. Metal remembers every year it carries. Leather remembers every mile. For the first time since Ethan rescued me from that little vintage shop, I felt something unfamiliar inside my aging frame. It was not fear for myself. Cameras are made to wear out. It was fear that the last 2 photographs still waiting inside me would become more important than every frame I had captured before, because somewhere just beyond the quiet happiness of that perfect spring evening, destiny had already begun reaching for all 3 of us. People often believe that endings arrive with loud goodbyes, but the truth is far quieter. Sometimes an ending begins in the middle of an ordinary afternoon while everyone is still smiling. Spring spread across Boston in gentle waves of color as cherry blossoms gave way to fresh green leaves and graduation banners appeared across campus. Ethan and Noah found themselves counting the remaining weeks of college without ever admitting how quickly time had slipped away. Their conversations slowly shifted from assignments and weekend plans to job interviews, apartment hunting, and uncertain futures that stretched far beyond familiar streets. Yet whenever uncertainty became too heavy, Ethan instinctively reached for me, as though another photograph might somehow slow the passing days. Only 2 exposures remained inside my final roll of film. Ethan knew it. Noah knew it. Neither of them mentioned it aloud. One bright Saturday morning, Noah convinced Ethan to visit a botanical garden just outside the city. Rows of blooming tulips stretched across the landscape, while families wandered winding paths beneath flowering trees. The air smelled of fresh grass and warm sunshine after days of spring rain. Noah walked ahead with the same effortless energy that had first captured Ethan's attention months earlier, stopping every few minutes to admire colorful flowers or tease Ethan for photographing everything except himself. "You know," Noah laughed, turning around with his hands tucked into the pockets of his light denim jacket. "One day someone is going to think I was your only friend." Ethan smiled without lowering me. "That would not be completely inaccurate." Noah froze for the briefest second before laughing again, though this time his smile carried something gentler beneath the humor. I recognized that expression. It was the same quiet honesty that had been growing between them frame by frame. Later they found an old wooden bench overlooking a peaceful pond where ducks drifted across reflections of blooming trees. They sat together for a long time, speaking about childhood dreams, favorite memories, and the strange realization that adulthood no longer felt distant. Noah finally broke the comfortable silence. "Do you remember the first picture you ever took of me?" Ethan nodded immediately. "You were chasing your notebook across campus." Noah laughed. "I looked ridiculous." Ethan shook his head. "You looked unforgettable." The words escaped before he could stop them. Silence followed. Not awkward or uncomfortable, but full of emotions neither of them had yet learned how to describe. Noah turned slowly toward Ethan, his warm hazel eyes reflecting sunlight dancing across the water. "I am really glad you picked up that old camera," he said quietly. Ethan looked down for a moment before answering with complete sincerity. "I think it picked me." Neither of them realized how true those words actually were. As they prepared to leave, Noah gently reached for me once more. "One last picture here," he said softly. Ethan stood beside the pond while Noah carefully adjusted my focus with surprising confidence after months of learning every dial and lever by heart. He smiled through my viewfinder before pressing the shutter. Click. Only one exposure remained. My gears turned with their familiar mechanical rhythm, but something inside my aging body felt different. The worn leather strap creaked more noticeably than before, and the small crack near my viewfinder caught the afternoon light. Ethan absent-mindedly ran his thumb across the old leather, unaware that years of faithful use had finally taken their toll. He lifted me back onto his shoulder as they walked toward the parking lot, still laughing about forgotten college memories and impossible plans for the future. Above them, the sky remained perfectly clear, beautiful enough to convince anyone that tomorrow would arrive exactly as expected. I alone knew that one untouched frame still waited inside me. And somehow every bolt, spring, and piece of glass I carried seemed to understand that the final photograph was already searching for us. Time does not steal memories all at once. It first hides them inside ordinary afternoons, then waits patiently for years before asking whether anyone still remembers where they were left. Graduation came beneath clear blue skies and the ringing of church bells drifting across Boston. Black gowns, proud families, and endless photographs filled every corner of the campus that had quietly become home. Ethan carried me one last time through familiar brick pathways while Noah walked beside him, waving at classmates and laughing whenever someone insisted on taking another group picture. The future surrounded them in congratulations, handshakes, and promises to stay in touch. Yet beneath every smile rested the silent understanding that life was about to scatter everyone in different directions. My final frame still waited inside me, untouched. Ethan had refused to use it. "One last exposure deserves the right moment," he had said weeks earlier. Noah never argued. Somehow he believed the perfect moment would simply arrive when it was ready. After the ceremony ended, the two of them slipped away from the celebration and wandered back toward the quiet riverside bench where they had spent countless evenings talking about dreams that had once seemed impossibly far away. The Charles River reflected the warm colors of early summer, while sailboats drifted lazily across the water. The city skyline shimmered beneath soft afternoon light, almost unchanged despite how much their lives already had. They sat together without speaking for several minutes. There was nothing left to prove and nothing urgent to say. Noah finally broke the silence with a gentle smile. "Funny how we spent all year trying to hold on to moments, and now they already feel like memories." Ethan looked down at me resting in his hands before answering. "Maybe memories are just moments that finally realized how important they were." Noah turned toward him, his expression warmer than I had ever seen before. "You always know how to make ordinary things sound beautiful." Ethan laughed quietly. "That is because I had a good subject." Noah shook his head with a smile that lingered longer than usual. "Maybe we were both looking through the same lens all along." They stood and slowly walked toward the old stone bridge that crossed the river. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh grass and flowering trees, while the late afternoon sun painted everything in soft gold. Ethan stopped halfway across the bridge and looked around as though searching for something invisible. Then he handed me to a passing elderly couple who had been admiring the view together. "Would you mind taking one picture for us?" he asked politely. The woman smiled with genuine kindness and carefully accepted me. Ethan stepped beside Noah. This time there was no hesitation. Noah reached over and quietly took Ethan's hand. Their fingers intertwined as naturally as breathing. Neither of them looked at the camera. They looked only at each other, smiling with the peaceful certainty that sometimes arrives when two hearts finally stop pretending not to understand themselves. The woman gently pressed my shutter. Click. My final exposure was complete. At that exact instant, the worn leather strap that had carried me through every season finally surrendered to time. As she handed me back, the weakened strap slipped free from its aging clasp. I fell only a short distance onto the smooth wooden walkway of the bridge, my metal body striking the boards with a dull crack. Ethan immediately picked me up with both hands, relief filling his face when he saw I had not shattered. But something inside me had changed forever. My shutter would no longer advance. My film remained safely inside, yet the final image had become trapped beyond reach. Neither Ethan nor Noah knew it then, but the last photograph of their youth had just been sealed inside my silent heart, where it would remain unseen as the years quietly carried all three of us toward a future none of us could yet imagine. Years passed more quietly than anyone expected. Seasons continued changing above the city. Students graduated and returned as visitors. Cafes changed owners, and familiar streets welcomed new faces that had never known the stories hidden inside their sidewalks. I remained forgotten inside a cardboard storage box in the corner of Ethan's attic, my cracked body wrapped carefully in an old blue scarf instead of being thrown away. He could never bring himself to discard me, even though my shutter no longer moved, and the final roll of film remained trapped inside my silent frame. Dust gathered across my worn leather, but memories never gathered dust. They stayed as vivid as the afternoon sunlight reflected on the Charles River. Ethan and Noah built a life together exactly as they had once imagined during those late nights in the library. They found work they loved, filled their home with framed photographs developed from every completed roll except the last one, and often laughed about the mystery hidden inside the broken camera that neither of them could open without risking the film forever. Maybe it is better this way, Noah would sometimes say. Some memories become more beautiful because we cannot see them every day. Ethan always smiled, though I knew he still wondered what the final photograph had captured. Decades slipped by until one warm summer afternoon, gentle footsteps climbed into the attic once again. This time they did not belong to Ethan. They belonged to a curious young man with chestnut hair, bright hazel eyes, and the same easy smile Noah had carried so many years before. His name was Oliver Carter Brooks. He had grown up surrounded by framed photographs of two young men whose laughter seemed almost too joyful to belong to another generation. He carefully opened forgotten boxes, searching for old family keepsakes, until his hands finally found me beneath the faded blue scarf. "Dad," he called downstairs. "I think I found the old camera you always talked about." Ethan climbed the attic stairs more slowly than he once had, his silver hair catching the afternoon light. When he saw me resting in Oliver's hands, his expression softened with recognition and gratitude. He gently brushed away years of dust before smiling. "I never thought I would see you again." Noah soon joined them, laughing when he recognized my familiar shape despite the cracked body and worn leather. Oliver turned me over curiously before asking, "Did it ever work again?" Ethan shook his head. "No, there is still one photograph trapped inside." Oliver looked from one father to the other. "Then maybe it is time." A few weeks later, I rested on the workbench of a respected film restoration specialist who patiently examined every gear, every spring, and every crack earned through decades of faithful service. Hours passed in complete silence before he finally smiled. "The film survived," he said gently. "It only needed someone willing to listen to an old camera." When the final image slowly appeared inside the developing tray, no one spoke. There was no hidden tragedy, no farewell, no secret heartbreak. The photograph revealed exactly what I had always hoped it contained. Ethan and Noah stood on the old stone bridge with their fingers intertwined, looking only at each other while the golden evening sun surrounded them like quiet grace. They were not posing for the future. They were simply living one perfect, ordinary moment. Noah smiled through tears as Ethan reached for his hand once again, just as he had in the photograph decades earlier. "That," Noah whispered, "was the moment we stopped wondering whether we belonged together." Ethan nodded, unable to look away from the image. I had always believed my purpose was to preserve light. I finally understood that I had been preserving something far greater. Photographs fade. Metal grows old. Leather wears thin. Even time eventually softens every sharp edge. But love remembered with kindness never truly disappears. It simply waits, patiently and silently, until someone is ready to see it again.